Hey friends, welcome to Intro to External Flash and Studio Lighting. Flash has been such a game changer in my business, and I really hope that it can be the same for you through this mini course. Flash can help you feel confident walking into any single lighting scenario. It minimizes anxiety and it helps you gain a professional advantage over your competition because let's be real, there are tons and tons and tons of photographers out there, and not that many use Flash, and it can really help you stand out. About me, just really quickly, I have been doing photography for about 15 years. I've photographed about 130 weddings and thousands of family sessions. I now specialize in branding photography for small businesses, which really involves a lot of indoor work. So I've been able to put a lot of my flash knowledge that I gained a lot from weddings into my branding work, which has been super fun. I opened Kindle Photo Studio and Event Space in 2021. That's a physical studio that I use, but then I also rent out to other photographers. So it's a separate business. That way it's not sitting empty when I'm not using it. And most importantly, I've been married to my awesome husband, Preston, for 11 years. And we've got two kiddos right now. They're 1 and 4 years old. So we're in the thick of it. Okay, we're going to dive right in. Before we get into Flash, I want to just give a little nod to continuous light. This is definitely not something that you have as much creative control with, but if you need a little pop of light, there are a few certain scenarios that it is really helpful to have in. So there are very small LEDs that you can use for just a small pop of light, maybe in a coffee shop pointed at somebody's face. The time that I have used that is at a wedding for the sparkler exit when it's so dark that you can't even focus your camera on the subject because they're moving and it's super dark. So I just put in a little LED right on a stand next to me that is shining on them just to give enough light to be able to see the subject and grab onto them for super sharp photos. The continuous bulbs I see sometimes with newborn photography, but I'll show you what I use that I think is actually easier, but they are a nice simple setup. You do have to plug them in so they're not as portable. And then you can't control the ambient light separately from the light that's hitting your subject with these continuous lights. External flash is often one of the most intimidating parts of photography. That's why so many people don't do it, but it will totally set you apart. Being able to make beautiful, consistent images anywhere you are will speak volumes and grow that trust factor with your clients and potential clients. And then also, outside of consistency, you can get really creative to create images that really stand out from everybody else's. I put the equipment that I use on this slide. There are so many options out there, but I just wanted you to have a starting place. I use Canon R6s and I use the Canon EL1 as my main speed light. I have a couple of other ones. I've got the Canon EXRT, Canon 600 EXRT, which I think is an older version. So there's probably, I think the EL1 is a lot newer than that one. But those, the Yongnuos, Godox is a great brand. There's so many out there. We'll talk about a few things to look for when you're purchasing a flash in a few slides, but these are just what I use as a starting spot. So the transmitter just is what goes on the top of your camera and it talks to the flash to make them flash. I put those options there. I have the first Canon one. And then for light diffusers, the main two that I'm going to talk about is a MagSphere and Grip, which is this thing. It's magnetic. It goes on this little grip on your camera, on your flash, pops right on. It's not going anywhere. Super easy, super affordable. Might feel like a lot at first, but is worth every penny. And in the long run, you buy it once and you're good. The other one I use is the Westcott 26-inch octagonal rapid box. That's this guy. You can kind of see him down here. He's super small, 26 inches, very portable. I use this one a ton, inside and outside. So that is a must have, in my opinion, for portability with some nice soft light. I also use these cold shoe connectors for stands to hold my flashes on stands. That Rapid Box has a stand piece built into it, so it goes right on the stand. But if I'm using this little guy like this on a stand or a bare flash on a stand, this is a must-have. So you can buy a bunch of cheap options on Amazon, but they always feel super rickety, like they're going to fall off. So this is very, very sturdy. You slide it on here and you lock it into place, and then you use this guy, this little handle to angle it however you want. So it's Very sturdy, worth every penny as well. Okay, we're going to talk through some terms to start out, just to get us all kind of on a baseline. Some of these might be obvious, but the hot shoe is the connection plate on the top of your camera. It's called hot because it allows communication between your camera and the speed light when it's placed on your camera or your transmitter. A cold shoe is something like this that we just talked about, an external connection plate for your speed light. It doesn't provide any communication for the flash. You'll need a transmitter or something. This is just to literally hold it on. That's why it's called cold. Radio versus line of sight. This is something to look for when you're going to purchase a flash. So most cheaper flashes will operate on a line of sight system, which means they won't go off unless they see another flash or they can see your transmitter line of sight. I really suggest making sure that whatever flash you buy has the radio function, because you want those channels to be able to walk around corners. Say you're at a wedding, there's a pillar, you set your flash up by the pillar, you walk around the pillar or up onto a balcony to get a cool angle. You definitely want your flash to still be able to talk to your transmitter. So that's a definite must have, is the radio function. Manual is just what it sounds like. You are controlling the power of the flash manually, how much light it's pushing out. One is full power and the brightest option, half is half power, and so on. This is definitely what I suggest learning because you have the most control over it. ETTL is evaluative through the lens metering. This uses a little pre-flash before you take an image, and that improves the accuracy of the exposure. It's kind of like your auto setting for your flash. So you're choosing the settings for the camera, and it's adding in the flash and showing you what it thinks is the correct exposure. If what it thinks is correct seems too dark or bright to you, go ahead and use something called flash exposure compensation on the speedlight itself to adjust it to where you like it. Some more terms. Recycle time is how long it takes for your flash to be ready to flash again after the first flash. So some of the cheaper flashes have a longer recycle time. That's some value that you get with a more expensive flash, is the recycle time is a lot faster and you have a lot more power with some of those more expensive ones. Sender and receiver. Historically, this has been called master and slave, but a couple of years ago, they changed it for obvious reasons to sender and receiver. This is used to describe which flash or transmitter is in control of the others. So when a speedlight is on the hot shoe of your camera, it will be the master. Or if the transmitter is on the hot shoe of your camera, it will be the sender. And then all the speedlights that are off on stands, those would be the receivers. Channels are really helpful. I know we talked about the radio function for being able to have them control each other and not have to be within line of sight. Different channels are helpful, though, when multiple photographers are using flash. Say you have a second photographer at a wedding, you'll want to make sure that you are only making the flashes on channel 1 fire, whereas the second photographer can choose channel 3 or something to make sure that they are firing separately. Groups gets a little bit crazy. You can do groups. You can make 3 flashes in group A, 2 flashes in group B, and have them fire separately, controlled from your transmitter. That gets crazy. I've never actually used it, but it's an option that's out there. Let's go ahead and talk about some settings. So something that really helped me kind of understand and break apart flash at the beginning is just thinking about the ambient light of the image, the background of the image, versus the subject separately. So kind of breaking those two pieces apart instead of thinking about the overall image altogether and trying to figure that out. Start by thinking about, in a lot of settings, a lot of controlled settings at least, start by thinking about that background, the ambient light, and how you want that to look, and set your camera for that, and then add in the flash onto your subject, and then you can kind of adjust the brightness of the flash based on that. Shutter speed is going to control how much ambient light is recorded. It doesn't have a lot of effect on flash exposure because the flash duration is usually a lot faster than the shutter speed. An example here, just slower shutter is a brighter background, faster shutter is a darker background. There are a few limitations on that, which I have in another slide, but just keep that little nugget in mind that shutter speed is controlling just that ambient light in the image. The aperture affects both the flash and the ambient light exposure. Wider aperture, so smaller f-stop number, lets in more light from both sources. ISO is the same way. It affects both the flash and the ambient light equally because it amplifies the sensor's sensitivity to all the light hitting the scene from both the flash and the room. Maximum sync speed, this is the kind of limitation that I was talking about with the shutter speed. The maximum sync speed is usually right at 1/200 of shutter speed. Most cameras won't let you shoot faster than the maximum, but if they do, you might see that black bar across the bottom of the screen. That means your shutter speed is too fast, so it's not giving enough time for the flash to hit the entire scene before the image has been captured. High speed sync is a setting that I don't really use, but a lot of sports photographers, fast movement type thing could definitely be helped with this. High speed sync lets you use a faster shutter speed. It puts out light in smaller pulses instead of one longer light. It does use a lot more power from the flash, especially because you are darkening the image by that faster shutter speed. So you're having to use a lot more flash power to capture that image. So that's one thing to watch out for with that. I think if you're doing just regular, even weddings, I haven't even needed to use this for dancing photos or anything like that. 1/200 usually seems totally fast enough, especially because the flash kind of helps freeze the image. So even if you wouldn't normally be comfortable using a handheld camera at say 1/60 for a shutter speed because you would be afraid of a little bit of camera shake just from your hands pushing the button and walking around, the flash kind of helps that. So you can push it a little bit slower than normal because the flash hits what you want it to and it kind of freezes it in place and helps with that kind of shake issue. The zoom head on a speed light or an external flash, that adjusts how focused or spread out the beam of light is. So a wider zoom, it kind of corresponds to the focal length of your lens. So a wider zoom, like a 24 millimeter, 35 millimeter, that's going to spread your flash really broadly, softer, more even coverage, really good for bigger groups, that kind of thing. And then a narrow zoom, something like 105 millimeters, 200 millimeters, that flash beam is tighter and more concentrated. This is going to be more intense, kind of more directed onto one subject, isolating it, or sometimes using it outdoors so that it's not just hitting the whole scene, it's hitting just your subject that you want it to. Like I said, that zoom range corresponds to the lens's focal length and it mimics how the lens sees. So my first setup that I'm going to talk about is actually your external flash right on top of your camera. There's nothing wrong with this. There are some great instances that it's super helpful. And it's kind of a nice place to start if you aren't comfortable with flash yet and you just want to get started, get a feel for it before you start using it off camera. If I do weddings, I don't do many anymore, but if I do one, this is what I always use on one camera to always have one ready, kind of a wide lens situation so I can always capture whatever's in front of me and I don't have to worry about people being exactly in the right spot for wherever my lights are on stands. In-home lifestyle sessions is another great place to use this. And I would start out if you have a flat white ceiling, which is always super nice when that happens. I would use the bare flash, no modifiers on the end, flash connected to your camera, the hot shoe of your camera right on top, bare flash pointed up at the ceiling. You'll have to use a little bit more power pointed up at the ceiling instead of pointed at your subject, but you're going to get nice, soft, even lighting in super dark settings. And just this is great for when you want just an overall brighter image. One little note for this scenario, as well as the other ones, is just if you can, keep your subject a little bit away from the wall. If you have them right up against a wall, you're probably going to get some unwanted shadows right there, especially if your flash is right on top of your camera. This one was in a getting ready room, obviously, that didn't have a lot of light, but I was able to point the flash right at the ceiling and make it look like there was a big window behind her, basically. If you don't have a nice flat white ceiling to use, which I know is a lot of scenarios, that is when I use this mag sphere and grip. This thing you can literally point right at somebody and it softens the light enough to not be too crazy harsh. You can also feather it a little, so instead of pointing it directly at someone, you just kind of angle it up just a tiny bit, feathers it a little bit. That can get an even softer look, and it's really good for just those run and gun situations like a wedding reception. All of these photos right here were taken with that exact thing right on my camera, pointed straight at the subject. So it does a great job. They're not like the most dynamic photos in the world, but they definitely get the job done. And especially if, in a first dance, they're doing a twirl or a spin or something that you just really want to nail and not miss, it's kind of your surefire way to get those photos because it's just right on your camera like that. These ones are using the bare flash pointed right at the ceiling because I had a nice flat white ceiling for all of these. Even this one, just a dark bathroom for this hairstylist shoot. We were able to get an awesome photo just with her well lit and the background well lit, just overall brighter image for all of these. My second setup I use is one portable softbox. So that is this Rapid box, the 26-inch Octabox thing. I'll put the link in the show notes as well. But this is great for 1 to 2 subjects at sunset or night. I often use it for seniors, engagements, bride and groom sunset portraits. It's great for bringing out city lights, and I'll show you an example of that in a minute. It's also really great for indoor on location brand photography. I think it would be great for boudoir, kind of anything that you're doing with just a small group of people, especially 1 or 2, anything backlit or dark, you're going to be golden with this. So this is where you have your transmitter on your camera, you have your speed light off your camera on a stand with this softbox. And then if you need it, you could use a little LED to shine, but I don't usually need that too often. Then you kind of have an assistant or the stand positioning it really high off to the side, angled down at your subject a little bit. That kind of helps the light separate the subject from the background instead of just spraying the light all over the entire scene. And then the closer you get that softbox to the subject, the softer it will be. It feels a little bit backwards, but the closer the softbox is to your subject, the softer the light's going to be, wraps around them a little bit more. And the further away you are, the more directed it is at them. So here are a few examples of using that exact setup with the softbox. These two were taken with flash. This one was natural light here at the beginning, as you can see. This one and the middle one, this left one and the middle one, those were taken within just a couple of minutes of each other. So you can see there's not a huge difference, but it was getting just dark enough that by exposing with the natural light for their skin, it was kind of blowing the background out and I didn't get all the detail of the mountains and the sky. So by adding in that flash, I just added in a little bit. I got more rich colors. I got the detail of the sky and the mountains behind them. And then I also avoided any grain on their skin. I got natural skin tones and I got a nice catch light in their eyes. This one doesn't matter too much because they're so far away, but you definitely always want to have that catch light so that people look alive. You don't want the dead eye look with no catch light. It also helps for getting really sharp features, the catchlight does. And then this one, same thing. There's no way I would have gotten the detail of the mountains and the sky behind them on this right one because this huge rock face was right behind me where I was standing for this picture. So for this one, I had to have an assistant holding a light, which I often don't have. So I was grateful that somebody else was there who could hold this light for me. Was in a great spot for a stand, obviously. But there was no light bouncing onto this couple because of this huge rock face. So they would have been either pitch black or if I had exposed for their skin, the whole mountain scene would have been blown out behind them. And then here are a couple indoor examples from a recent shoot. You can see the photo in the middle is from the exact spot that the behind the scenes is on the right. I had it a little bit further away for this one because I did some full body shots. You could even do it a little bit closer for these half body shots, but she was just not close enough to the window to get a really nice light on her face. And then the one on the left, the behind the scenes, she was close enough. She had a great light on her face, but the whole left side of her and that side of the room was pretty dark because I had turned off all the orange lights. Always better to turn off the lights if they're orangey at all, if they're close to your subject, especially in my opinion. I always regret it when I don't. So that just really lit up that side of her face and made the image very even lighting, which is really my style. Here are a couple more scenarios. Same spot with I think I might have already shared this photo with the mountain scene. This one was inside, this middle one with the realtor. This one of the couple at their wedding, I actually had the softbox close enough that I had to Photoshop the stand out of this image. So that tells you how close I had it here, but I was really able to get some of that detail in the sky behind them by using flash instead of just blowing everything out. I'm not even sure I would have had enough light at that point to take a solid picture of them without it. So it was really fun. And this ended up being one of my very favorite shots. And then bottom left corner, you see a nice, very backlit image. So I was able to kind of minimize the haze that sometimes comes from that coming from behind by filling in with some flash in the front. Okay, now this is one of my very favorite examples because these images were taken probably within about 10 minutes of each other. The first one was natural light, and the second one, I actually may have used a little bit of flash for that one as the sun was going down. I can't remember, but you can tell how light it was still out. The sun had literally just dipped behind the horizon, so there was still a lot of ambient light available to use, but by adjusting for that background first and making it look darker basically with the camera settings, and then turning up the power of my flash and making it more of an intense flash towards the subject, I was able to make it look like it was way closer to night outside. So that's a really fun little trick to get some nice creative photos. And then these are a couple more with that same setup, same mountain spot there, same idea. And then this courtroom one was very dark. We had literally no light. They were all orangey lights. We had pretty orange background, which is always tough, but I was at least able to get their skin tones really nice, natural, and kind of captured the vibe of the space, which is what they needed as lawyers. These ones were actually, let's see, this bottom one was actually the flash on a stand pointed up. So I can tell by the shadow here, I have this a little bit in the wrong spot, but I had the flash pointed up at the ceiling for this one, bouncing back onto them. And then this one of the hairstylist was using the softbox angled down towards her. These were all the softbox as well. You can see that there's no real orangey tones in these photos, the exception being the very far right and that very back. I don't mind that the orange light being on that far back in the background, but if it had been this light that's right next to her face here, that would have been really rough to compensate for. So I often will turn off the lights in a house or a salon, even this one with the mirror. We turned off all of the lights for this one, which felt super, super dark, but using that window light and then using the softbox on the other side to fill in helped it be very even and very natural colors. Here is just a quick variation of the first setup. So it's almost more similar to having your flash right on your camera and pointing it up towards the ceiling, like we talked about at the beginning, except it's off your camera, it's on a stand. These ones are bare flashes pointed straight at the ceiling, transmitter on your camera, one bare flash on a stand pointed towards the ceiling. These are great for those indoor locations with a white ceiling, used to fill in shadows, and when you want the overall image to be brighter. And I like this even better than having it on my camera because it gives you a little bit better angle. If you move that flash to the side of you instead of doing it directly from you, you avoid even more shadows, especially if someone is kind of close to a wall, it'll fill in a little bit better behind them if the flash is closer to them rather than right by you. It's also a super portable option. You can get into a really small nursery for a newborn session or that kind of thing really easily without a big softbox setup. So I often use this for lifestyle newborn sessions. And it's great in that scenario for filling a room with light when you're shooting from a different room. So if you are in a hallway trying to shoot into a nursery, that is a great option to use that for. Here's this image again. It's in the right spot here. So this is the wedding image. It's on a flash. The flash is on a stand pointed right at the ceiling, and then it's bouncing all that light back onto them for a nice, bright, even image. Same thing for this lifestyle newborn session. And then same for all of these as well. You can see the through the doorway shot I was talking about right there. You can see a couple of their nursery shots. It's great as babies move around and you don't have to worry about the light being in the exact perfect spot. You can just kind of place it opposite of whatever window light you might have to use. And then bottom left, this was a brand shoot for an esthetician, and she was in a very, very, very dark, very small area. I'm not even sure I would have had room for my softbox, but this was great because there was a white ceiling, so I was able to bounce it off and make it look like a nice, bright image. My last setup for this is my favorite one for weddings, especially for receptions, first dances, toasts, open floor, that kind of thing. This is where you have a transmitter on your camera, and then you have two speed lights off camera on separate stands, and they cross light the dance floor. You can use these mag spheres for a softer light. I tend to like punchy light for receptions, so I usually use a bare flash for that. I'll show you kind of how that looks in a second too. But basically, you'll have them cross lighting the dance floor from roughly, depending on the room, you may need to move them towards a pillar or something like that, but as close as you can get to right across from each other. And then you'll always kind of stand near one of them. And you'll have to adjust the power a little bit. So if the couple is closer to you, your first flash that you're standing right next to will have a little bit less power, and the one way far behind, you might have to turn up a little bit to get this hair light. Like you see the hair light on the groom right here. So I've got one flash pointing towards their faces, and then one flash coming kind of from behind his head, since I couldn't put it directly across. And then for weddings, I usually use this setup with the transmitter on a camera that has a longer zoom lens, like a 70 to 200 on it. That way I can keep my wider lens with my kind of run and gun setup where I just use this directly on my camera, no transmitter. That way, for any of the group shots where people run up to you and say, "Hey, take a picture of me and my friends," you don't have to worry about them being right by your stand. And then also, if he goes to spin or twirl her, I know no matter where they are on the dance floor, I'm going to get that shot because I can use my wider lens, just in case they're not right in the middle of the dance floor, because that happens. Here are some examples. You can see these are a lot more dynamic than the one light setups because you have that light behind them, giving them that little halo, that little hair light separating them from the background. The top left one of looks like a dad and daughter or something like that in the green dress. That's kind of how the bare flash looks when it flashes. So I love that kind of sun ray look coming from the flash. With the mag mod sphere on it, it would have been a little bit more of just a softer spotlighty look instead of those little lines coming off. So I really like that. Some people like that in the image, some people don't. So you can kind of play around with it however you like it. But I think for wedding receptions specifically, it gives kind of a fun party vibe. So you can tell this one, you can kind of look at the shadows and see exactly where I had the flashes. So this middle one, the bare flash was coming from that back left because you can see her shoulder has a nice light on it along with the side of his face there. And then you can see the shadow of their hands on his white shirt there. So you can tell exactly where that other flash is coming from. That was pretty directly across from the other one. So that's kind of the basics for external flash, my portable options that I use to walk into any scenario and feel confident that I can get people great images no matter how dark it is or how strange the lighting. I'm going to go through a couple quick studio lighting basics. Very similar to this, you just have a lot more controlled environment, which can be helpful. This you're going to use strobes for instead of speed lights. So speed lights are the run and gun, you don't have to plug them in, flashes. And then the strobes are more power, a little bit bigger, less portable, and you do have to plug them in. You can get continuous lights. I would definitely get strobes that use a flash, but a lot of the strobes have what's called a modeling light. So when you turn it on, you'll have a little bit of light to work with. That is really helpful if you're in a true studio setting with no natural light. So you can actually have a little bit of light for your camera to be able to focus on your subject and you can kind of just see what's going on without having to use any ambient lighting in the room. This whole strobe situation is great for brand shoots, headshots, product photography, creative editorial work, fashion photography. I've even done recently some very, very small families on like a seamless backdrop with this. That's been really fun. I think I have an example coming up. But one last tip before we dive into the setups is even if your camera doesn't allow you to break that maximum sync speed, which is that 1/200 shutter speed when shooting with your speed light. Mine does that. Mine will not let me do that, so I don't ever have that black bar at the bottom because I don't actually accidentally make my shutter speed too fast. It sometimes might let you do it with strobes. I don't know why it does that with my studio strobes, so I just have to keep in mind a good place to start is literally just always put it at 1/200 shutter speed when you're using flash, and then if you really need more ambient light coming from the background of the image, go ahead and make that shutter speed a little bit slower. So something like 1/60, something like that. But good place to start is just 1/200 as a rule of thumb. Here is the equipment that I use. I use the DigiBee strobes. They're very similar to Alien Bees, and they come with this. Well, they don't come with it, but you got to buy the CyberSync transmitter and receiver. And I got those from Paul C. Buff. All of their stuff is really, really amazing. And then I have a couple of giant octoboxes and rectangular kind of strip boxes, and then honeycomb grid, which we'll talk about in a minute. But that just kind of controls where the light hits. So for a one light studio setup, you just do basically the same thing we did with this smaller portable softbox, 45-degree angle, just across, just kind of off your shoulder to either camera right or left. Stand up high, light angle down just a little bit towards your subject, so it's really isolating the subject and not just spraying all over the backdrop. Same rule with the closer it is to your subject, the softer the light is. Farther away is a little bit harder light. And then modifiers do matter. So larger softbox or umbrella is going to get you soft, even lighting with really gentle shadows. Something like a beauty dish or whatever a smaller, however small your light source is, it's gonna be harder light the smaller it is. Beauty dish is going to be more of a punchy light with detail and contrast, which is great for portraits. You can use if you have something like a reflector or a V flat, which is basically a giant poster board that's white on one side, black on the other. So you can just kind of it's got kind of an angle like this, so it can stand up tall, but it's taller than a person usually. If you have something like that you can place opposite of that light just to fill in a few of those shadows that are created by the harsh light hitting them from one side, that can really help with this. But I don't really have much of anything like that at the studio, so I often just use the one light and it works out pretty well. Here are some examples you can see with the one light setup. So the one in the middle with the pineapple, that was just directly towards her with the white backdrop with the one giant softbox. And then the one on the very left, the maternity shot, that was just the light moved farther away from me. So it was coming directly from the side because we wanted a lot harsher look, but still just one light. And we wanted those shadows and it worked out great. And then the one on the right, I liked at first until I started using a two light setup. So I'll show you how much better it could have been with a hair light as well, especially with her dark hair kind of fading into that black backdrop. I kind of lost some of the detail and like punchiness there. So I'll show you that in a minute, but here are a few more examples of just the one giant softbox right off to my right or left over my shoulder, shooting pretty close to them on a plain backdrop. Works out pretty well. The two light setup is just adding one to that first one light setup. So I'm going to add a rectangular softbox towards the back. So if I'm using a seamless backdrop, it would be basically by the stand of the backdrop pointed towards their hair. So it takes a little playing around with to get it at the right angle, but once you do, it's so much more magical than the one light setup. And then I've got a couple notes about the honeycomb grid in a minute, but I like to use that so that light is really directed towards the subject and it doesn't kind of spray out towards my camera since it's pointed a little bit more towards me. So here are some examples with that. You can tell obviously she's a blondie, so she already stands off the black backdrop a little bit better, but that hair light really gives her a little bit of separation and makes for a lot stronger image. The backlight is great too for anything that's like you're wanting to capture in the air. So in this case, it was this hairspray on the left, and that would not have shown up if I didn't have that light coming from behind it to light it up. Same goes for like snow or rain. You really want that light behind the subject if you're trying to capture the rain in the image. And then here's one of the family ones that I got that I loved, just the mom and her son. Nice hair light to help them pop off the background, and she's got darker hair, so I thought that was a good example to show the difference that it can make for a little bit more punchy, powerful image. The last slide I have for you is just when to add a grid to your softbox. This is just to help control the light spill, so keep that light from bouncing off walls or floors. You get a little bit more dramatic, contrasty lighting with deeper shadows, makes it a little more moody and editorial. It keeps that background darker too, keeps your attention on the subject, and then it prevents the flare and highlights of that light flashing into your camera. It also just helps control multiple lights working together, just kind of keeping them in their own lanes. So I hope this has been helpful. I know that's a lot of information very quickly, but you should be able to download these slides. You can go click on the links, go refer back to anything that you had questions about or weren't sure of, and then definitely shoot me an email if you have any questions at hello@kirawhitney.com. I'd be happy to help if you have anything, and let me know if this was helpful too. I can't wait to see some of the images that you guys get, and I will be cheering you on from afar.